Today I'm going to bring you with me out into war. We are going to battle between the United States and Germany using tanks in Tank Clash. This is a two-player game where you go out to war with your little tanks trying to take over the enemy's territory. You will do this by moving these little tanks around. There are some different modes in this game that you can play, but I am going to show you the basic mode in this video and go over the other modes a little bit in the end of the video. I will show you the setup of this game, I'm going to give you an overview of the gameplay, but also go through the rules, so once you have watched this video, well then you know how to go into tank battle. This here is the setup of the game. To start with, each player gets a secret mission card. This is their top secret mission that they need to complete to win the game. Each player places this card face down in front of them. Then we need to shuffle the morale cards and place them face down next to the playing area. There are 4 types of terrain boards in this game. Each player are handed 2 boards that they place out in front of them. So these 2 boards here are the German territory. And these 2 boards here are the American territory. Now each player will place their 3 checkpoint tokens on their territory. On road 1, 4 and 7. And they can place these anywhere they want on those rows. The checkpoint on row 1 are considered to be base camps. The other 2 are checkpoints. These checkpoints must be placed in open spaces and cannot be placed inside of buildings. Now each player needs to place out their 5 tanks. There are 5 tanks that each player will have, 3 medium, 1 heavy and 1 tank destroyer. One of these tanks also have their ace beneath their tank. This will give their tank some extra abilities. Beneath that we also have the armor. Depending on which tank you place out, you need to place a different amount of armor. How much armor each tank should have can be seen on your player card. Here you can see which type that tank is, their firepower, armor and their speed. Then we need to flip this double-sided insignia token to see who will go first. In this case, America gets to go first. The first player starts to place out 1 of their tanks, then the second player plays out 1 of their tanks, going back and forward until all 10 tanks have been placed out on the maps. That was the setup of the game. It does not take that long time at all. Once we are set up, we are ready to go, and as you remember, this little token here decided that America is the one to start the battle. During the play, each player have 2 actions that they can use. But they cannot use the same action twice on the same tank. Meaning that you can move once with 1 tank and then move again with another tank, but 1 tank cannot move twice. Same thing works with firing. You can fire with 2 different tanks, but 1 tank cannot fire twice. But you can also choose to have 1 tank move and then shoot. That is okay. Players can win in a few different ways. Either if they manage to capture the enemy's base, or if they manage to destroy all of the enemy's tanks, but also if they manage to fulfill their secret mission. And there are 3 different types of mission. The first one is to capture any enemy's checkpoints. The second one is to destroy all of your enemy's medium tanks. And the last one is to take out your enemy's ace. Remember? That was the little token here that you put beneath 1 of your tanks. And these aces here gives your tanks a few benefits. But I will tell you a little bit about that in a while. First, let's take a look at what the players actually can do in this game. Let's start with movement. So during your turn, you can choose to move. Depending on how much you can move a tank is stated on your player's sheet, where you can see the speed of your tank that you would like to move. The Hellcat here, for example, has a movement of 3, meaning that we can move this tank up to 3 hexes. So, like this for example. But there are some terrains out on the map, as you can see. And these terrains will stop or slow down your tank, depending on what you're moving through. Flat terrain, like for example sand or grass, will not affect your movement or your attack. But the river, for example, will of course stop your movement because the tank cannot swim, so the tank will need to use the bridge. But it has no effect on attacks. The buildings will of course also hinder your movement, and you need to move around them instead. They will block your enemies from being able to attack you as they cannot fire through the houses. The forest will reduce your movement to 1, but it will give you a concealed effect if the enemy try to attack you. I will tell you more about this in a bit. So that was the movement. Quite easy, right? You look at your little sheet here to see how much speed your tank have. And then you can move that amount of hexes. It's not that complicated. You cannot move through buildings and you cannot swim over the sea. It all makes perfectly sense. Now, besides moving, a player can of course also attack their enemies. And this is just the same way. You need to look at your little sheet here to see what type of firepower you have. That amount of firepower will determine how far your reach is, but also how many die you get to roll. So in this case here, for example, the Hellcat is trying to take a fire at the Tiger 1. The Hellcat has a firepower of 4, meaning that they have a range of 4, so they are well within range. But they also get to throw 4 die to see if they hit. If they would have gotten 1 when they roll, that would be a miss, and they would have no effect. But if they get 2 instead, that would be a scare, and the opponent would retreat 1 hex. If they get 3, that is a light damage, meaning that the opponent gains 1 damage token. But if you do get a 4, that will be a heavy damage, and the opponent would gain 2 damage tokens instead. A number 5 is a hit, meaning that now you get to remove 1 armor token from the opponent instead. And if you are really lucky and you get a number 6, this will let you remove 1 armor token from your opponent, but also give you 1 morale card. So depending on which tank you are using to firing at your enemy, you get to roll different amount of die. But you only get to use the die with the highest amount. Meaning that you can't choose to use 2 or 3 dice to attack your enemies. No, you can only pick the one with the highest amount. But as I said before, if you have a tank inside of a forest, your tank is considered to be concealed. Meaning that the enemy tank needs to be at least 2 hexes away from you to be able to spot you. So it doesn't matter if you have a firepower of 4, you still cannot reach this tank that is inside the forest if you are more than 2 hexes away from it. But the tank that is inside the forest, they have a free line of sight of you. As they are inside the forest looking out, they can see you clearly. But if both tanks would be inside the forest, they need to be adjacent to be able to take a shot at each other. And remember that if your tank is inside a forest, they only have a movement of 1. And then we have line of sight. If there is a building or a tank between you and your enemy that you try to hit, you cannot take the shot, as the building is blocking your sight. But if your enemy tank would have been here instead, you would have been able to take the shot, as you have a clear line between you and your enemy. And the same thing applies if it would have been a tank instead of a building. You still would not have been able to take the shot. And that's how you attack. It's really not that hard, right? You need to be within line of sight, you need to be within range depending on which tank you are firing with. Then you roll that amount of die, and depending on what you get, you will either remove armor or place damage tokens on your victim. Or in the worst case scenario, nothing will happen because you completely missed your target. But what do these little damage tokens actually mean? Well, these are placed on your enemy tank if you roll a 3 or 4. And when your enemy have 3 of these damage tokens on top of them, they need to remove 1 of their armor. When all of the armor of that tank is gone, well then that tank is destroyed. But of course, if you are one of the lucky ones that know how to roll a die, I am not, and you get a 5 or a 6, you get to remove the armor right away without placing any damage tokens. If you have damage tokens on your tank, you can choose to visit one of your checkpoints to repair your tank and remove the damage tokens. But you cannot refill new armor tokens. Once you have lost them, they are gone. If you are on one of your checkpoints and an enemy damages you again, you need to move off the checkpoint and move on it again to be able to do the repairs. So at the start of the setup, we placed out 3 different checkpoints. The first one down here is your base, and the 2 other ones are simply just checkpoints. Now, your enemies can conquer your checkpoints. They do this by simply moving the little tank on the checkpoint and flipping it to the other side. Now, this one belongs to Germany instead. If the enemy ever managed to conquer your base, well then you have lost, because now the enemies have made this place their home. A player that occupies a checkpoint has a defender advantage, meaning that if they are attacked by an enemy, the enemy need to subtract their die roll by 1. So if they, for example, get a 5, it will now only count as a 4. Remember I told you about these little aces here that you place in one tank? Well, these aces will stick with that tank until the bitter end, meaning that when this tank is destroyed, well, the ace goes down with it and leaves the game. But until that happens, they will give this tank a benefit, because they will add 1 to your die roll, or you will be able to re-roll 1 die of your choice. So that's quite strong. Be sure to try to keep that fella alive. Besides the ace, you also have your tactical support to help you during your warfare. The artillery support, for example, will make the tank on the selected hex lose 1 armor token, and any of the surrounding tanks will get 1 damage token. The air support will do the same thing to the target tank, and the same thing to the tanks next to the target tank, in line as the card shows. The infantry support will add 1 die to your attack. The smoke down here will force your enemy to only move during 1 turn, because they can't see you. The repair lets you replace 1 lost armor token on a damaged tank. And the mines will let you add 2 damage tokens to any enemy tank in your territory. The tactical cards needs to be played at the start of your turn, and they can only be used once per turn. But then we also have the morale cards. You can have 3 morale cards at a maximum at a time. And again, they can only be used once per turn, and you can only use 1 of them during your turns. You can't use several of them. There are 4 different morale cards in this game. Some will give you attack advantages, other will give you defense advantages, movement advantages, but there's also special ones that will give you sabotage advantages. There's 2 ways for you to get morale cards. Either if you roll a 6 when you attack another enemy, or if you manage to capture one of your enemy's checkpoints. And that is how you play the game. It is quite easy. You have 2 actions per your turn. You can choose to either move 1 tank and fire with that tank, or fire with 1 tank and then fire with another tank, or move 2 different tanks. It's really up to you. You have your tactical cards here that you can use as support, but also the morale cards that you hopefully will get a few of. And whoever managed to reach the victory conditions first are the winners. And remember, that was taking over the enemy's base, destroy all the tanks, or complete your secret mission. that will make you a winner. So some of these games may take a long time and some of them will take a short time. It's all depending on what you have in mind. But there are a few different ways that you could choose to play this game. Instead of having the secret missions here or killing tanks, you can use victory points instead. Then it's all depending on which tank you manage to destroy, and then you will get different kind of victory points. You can also choose to play this game in a mode called the Fog of War, meaning that instead of having your tanks shown here at the top, you hide them beneath the armor. So your enemy does not know which tank this is, but you do not know which tank your enemy have either. When you come in the line of sight of your enemies, that's when you show which tank they are actually facing, which is a quite funny little mode. Also, you can have these boards facing and be turned and twisted in different ways if you want that. Like I told you, I showed you the basic game here just to get you an understanding of the gameplay. If you want to, you can add up the other things later, but it is recommended that you start with the basic mode, just to get the hang of the game. I thought that this game was a lot of fun. There is quite a bit of tactics in this game actually on how to move the little tanks around, how to best make use of your little cards here, but also how you use your morale cards and how you are supposed to manage to actually reach the goal of the game. This game is easy to learn, it's easy to set up, you can play this with younger kids as well, and you can play several turns at a night. And there is a lot of replayability here because no game is really the same. And it is a lot of fun to move your little tanks around here, takes a shot of your enemies, and just trying to get to the victory point, which is not always that easy. And depending on how many times you have played this game, it will of course get harder for you to win as well. The game I have here in front of me is of course just a prototype, but I think it's a quite well made prototype. The artwork and everything might change a little bit, but I quite like the artwork on these little tanks. I like the little board here, it's quite colorful and quite well made. I mean, there's not that much details on this board, but there doesn't need to be in a game like this. It should be quite simple and quite plain and just do the trick without overdoing it, and I think they succeed with that quite a bit. Also, the rules here are really well written. There's a lot of pictures showing what they mean, there's not that much text. And if you sit down and read this, I mean, you will be playing within 15 minutes tops. Every now and then you might be able to just go back and check up if there's any information that's a bit unclear, but the rulebook itself is quite good. Also, you do have these player boards that helps you out a lot. Here you can see the die that you need to do the attacks. You can see the different special cards and what they actually do, and of course you have all of the information about the different tanks on this one as well. So the game itself is quite easy to learn, but it's quite hard to master. That was Tank Clash Western Front for you, a two-player game where you go into battle with your cool and kind of cute little tanks. Like I said, I thought this game was a lot of fun. This is like advanced chess. You get to move around your little pieces and it's not that hard to learn. That's what I like. There's just some few basic rules that you need to know, and then you can pretty much go into battle. Once you have developed your own little skills here, well, then you might add up with the other things that you can do in this game. Add up a little bit of different layout with the boards here. Maybe you want to play the fog mode. There is a lot of things that you can do in this game. The only thing that I think that I am missing here is some kind of solo mode. But I guess that you could pretty easily make that up by yourself by just make a few basic rules for the enemies and how they move. It's not that hard, right? This game is a lot of fun, it is easy to learn, it's easy to set up. If you want to know more about it, there will be details down in the description. It will be out on Kickstarter November 2022. So take a look at that if you want to know more. If you liked the video, my friend, you know what to do. Hit that like button, give me a comment, talk to me. subscribe to the channel, whatever you would like to, or just say hi. I want to say hi to you, say hi to me. And until next time, people, please remember to keep on spreading that board gaming love that I know you all have. Peace.